Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your viewing. The world we live in is full of mysteries and oddities we don't even realize we have. I was once looking for a new couch on Craiglist, as my old one had already been chewed up by my dog and I was uncomfortable hosting guests in such an environment. After several hours of searching, I came across an ad for a blue couch for sale at an incredibly low price. The description said it was like new, from a pet-free home, and with no problems. I contacted the seller, an older woman named Betsy, and arranged to pick up the couch from her basement. When I arrived at Betsy's house, she made a favorable impression on me. She was nice and courteous, and when I was about to leave, gave me an additional $20 discount. I loaded the couch into my truck and was ready to go home, but then Betsy knocked on my window. I rolled down my window and asked what was wrong. She looked at me with a serious look and said, "I'm warning you, strange things are happening to that couch." I laughed a little nervously, thinking it was some kind of weird sales tactic, but finally said it must be okay and pulled out of her driveway. Later that night, after moving the couch into my living room, I went to sleep in my room. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. At first, I thought I was having a bad dream, but then I realized it was a whisper that woke me up. I got out of bed and went to the living room. It was cold in there, like an ice cave. The whispering had stopped, and that was fine. But what wasn't fine was the little girl sitting on the couch. The girl was dressed in a white dress. Her dark hair was loose, and her eyes were black and empty. She looked at me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to call out to her, but my voice stuck in my throat. The girl slowly got up from the couch and walked over to me. Her face was now right in front of mine, and I saw that her mouth was stretched in a creepy smile. She opened her mouth and I heard her voice. "Come to me," she whispered. I wanted to run away, but my body was paralyzed with fear. The girl reached out and touched my face. Her hand was icy cold, and I felt my body start to freeze. "Come to me," she whispered again. I closed my eyes and tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. The girl squeezed my hand tighter and tighter, and I felt my life leaving me. Suddenly, I heard a dog barking. I opened my eyes and saw my dog, who usually sleeps in my room, standing in the doorway looking at me. The girl sitting on the couch also looked at the dog, and I saw fear in her eyes. The dog growled and barked, and the girl let go of my hand and bounced away from me. I took advantage of that moment and ran from the living room. I heard the girl yelling after me, "Come back, come back!" But I didn't stop. I ran until I was in my room and locked the door. I stayed in my room all night, shaking with fear. In the morning, I called Betsy and told her what had happened. She said she knew about this girl and that she had been stalking her family for years. Betsy warned me that if I didn't get rid of the couch, the girl wouldn't leave me alone. I sold the couch the same day. I don't know where it is now, but I hope it won't hurt anyone else. It all happened a few years ago. I was a father of 2. My youngest son was 12 years old. There were a lot of things lying around the house that I had used when my son was younger. Most of them were toys. My wife and I wanted to get rid of a lot of the stuff because we weren't planning on having any more children. We thought it would be a good idea to post an ad online and find someone who could really use it, so we posted an ad on Craiglist with a picture and price. We got a few responses right away, but no one was serious about it. After a week or so, no one was still interested. My wife was about to give most of the stuff to the church when suddenly a message came through. The buyer seemed very interested and asked if he could deliver the toys. He said he doesn't normally do deliveries, but was willing to give me $20 for the job. It was nice that I didn't have to give a stranger my address. I didn't feel like going anywhere that night, but I agreed anyway. I loaded the toys into the car and drove off. We decided to meet in the public parking lot in front of the mall in my town. There, I pulled out my cell phone and checked my messages. There was a new message from a client. He wanted to change the meeting place. I apologized for the inconvenience and explained that I was stuck at a friend's house. He sent me a new address. It was 25 minutes away. It was farther away than the place I wanted to go. If he had given me the address from the beginning, I probably would have said no, but since I was already out of the house, I decided to drive to the new address. I wrote down the route on my phone. I didn't know the neighborhood very well. As I drove to the new address, the neighborhood became more and more desolate, and the streets less and less familiar. The buildings were covered in graffiti, and although it wasn't very late, there wasn't much pedestrian traffic. I think it was about 8 o'clock in the evening. When I arrived at the address given, it was an old apartment with a few people on the street. I didn't even feel like getting out of the car. I sat for a while and then checked my cell phone. There was a message from the buyer saying that he had seen my car. He asked me to get out of the car and meet him on the sidewalk. I looked around to get a better look at the man, but I couldn't do it. There was a group of teenagers there, but I didn't think it was him. Something about the whole thing was off. First, the change of location, then this. He walked over to my car, and there was no reason why we couldn't have exchanged there. I decided to leave and forget about all of this. I wouldn't be looking for money. I pulled away from the curb and stopped at a red light. Just then I noticed someone approaching my car on the sidewalk. At first I thought he was crossing the street, but he was headed for my door. I felt him pull on the handle and tried to open it. Fortunately, I always lock my door when I am driving. The man pulled the handle a few times and then tapped on the window for me to lower it. It was an older man. At first, I thought it was one of the teenagers I had seen before, but it wasn't. I had no idea where the man had come from. I didn't react to anything. I just sat there praying for a green light. The man kept banging on the window, and I just stared ahead. Finally, the signal changed, and I went full speed ahead without looking back. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I drove for a while longer, not wanting to go straight home, thinking I might have been followed. Perhaps I was being too paranoid, but I couldn't take any chances. As I drove, I began to think that the man at the stoplight might be the same man I had talked to on Craiglist. I had described my car to him in the message, so he might have known it was me. There was a gas station to my left, so I decided to stop and check his messages to see if he had sent any. I had gotten several angry messages from this man, and I was sure that he was the one trying to break into my car. This person was very angry, and I didn't know why. It couldn't have had anything to do with me losing my toys. It must have been about something else, but I still don't know. The obvious explanation would be that he was trying to steal from me, but how did he know I had something worth stealing? I still don't know what his motive was. Eventually, I went home feeling relieved. Once home, I explained everything to my wife. The wife was as shocked as I was. That was the last time I went to see a stranger. After I told her my story, my wife insisted that I donate our old belongings to the church. I didn't argue. I called the police, but they did virtually nothing. I didn't get a good look at the person who tried to open my car door, and the buyer's information on Craiglist was probably false. I work as an event coordinator at the convention center at the Swan and Dolphin Resort. Sometimes I have to be there long before the union people arrive. This is to get things ready for special events and such. One time, one of my supervisors cut my hours because of company budget cuts. As a result, my income was much lower, and my rent was lower, so I needed to either increase my hours or start making money until I found a new job. Eventually, I started selling things on sites like Craiglist and eBay, which increased my income. It wasn't much, but it was enough to feed me for a while. At the time, I was trying to sell a 1940s radio that was only worth a few cents. It was my grandfather's radio that had somehow fallen into my hands after his death. I received several offers to sell it, but mostly tried to keep the price as low as possible. However, one day I received a message from someone who seemed genuinely interested and was offering $500 over the set price. Of course, I accepted the offer, and he said I could stop by after his shift at 5 p.m. That was better because I didn't get home until 4 p.m. Anyway, it was 5 p.m., and a few minutes later there was a knock on the door and I opened it. When I opened the door, there stood a tall old man in his 50s with a long gray beard. To describe him better, he sounded like a biker from a hillbilly movie. In a low, husky voice, he said, "Hello, I've come to listen to the radio." I happily let him in, showed him the radio on the kitchen table, and gave him a snack. Strangely enough, he immediately began checking the condition of the radio, even looking inside. After what seemed like an eternity, he put the radio on the floor and said that since it was not in very good condition, he was willing to get rid of it for $300. Needless to say, I turned down the $500 deal. He looked at me with threatening eyes, and I realized that I had no choice. I ended up having to sign a contract with him on the spot. Keep in mind, my height is only 1.7 meters, and I didn't want to argue with a man like him. He gave me the money, put the radio in the car, thanked me, and drove off. I don't know why, but there was so much negativity in the air towards him that I was glad he left. I was lying in bed watching a movie when suddenly the phone rang. The call was from an unfamiliar number, but the area code was the same. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and immediately recognized the voice on the other end. It was the same man who had called to thank me, but what he said will forever be etched in my memory. At that moment, my mouth opened like never before, and all sorts of thoughts flashed through my mind. Honestly, I didn't know what else to do but digest what I had heard. I thought about calling the police, but then I realized that the number he was using was fake. This meant that even if the police traced the number, they wouldn't be able to contact him. I removed the ad from Craiglist after that, and never contacted that site again. The worst part is that I never received any information about his identity or if he was in jail. There are crazy people in this world who will do anything they can to get to you. I emphasize how important it is to be careful when buying and selling anything on sites like Craiglist. You never know who is out there and what they might do. I have used Craiglist several times over the past few years, mostly to buy and occasionally to sell. Nothing crazy has ever happened to me before this story. The worst thing that happened to me before this story was buying a laptop. When I first looked through it, I found a weird, homemade-looking, explicit video. It was weird, but I deleted it. I still can't believe people don't wipe down their laptops before selling them. Anyway, a few years after college, I was living with my two best friends, Josh and Ben. For various reasons, we drifted apart. I had gotten a job in another state, and the other two hadn't really gotten along with each other over the past year. Since I was leaving, we decided to go our separate ways. Otherwise, I would have to find a new roommate. Moving is a pain because my new job is over 10 hours away, so I had to get rid of most of my stuff. The big stuff definitely had to be thrown out. I decided to sell everything on Craiglist because I thought it would be the fastest way to clear out the house. The bed, TV, kitchen table, and chairs. When I sold all of those things, both of my roommates moved out, and I was the only one left in the apartment. The couch was gone too. Josh had moved it to his new apartment. A few days after posting the ad, I got a response. His name was Andrew, and he was interested in the kitchen and wanted to come see it. He asked for more pictures, which I happily sent. We then had a brief conversation on the phone. I thought it was a good idea, as I had an idea of who I would let into my home. So I made an appointment for him and gave him my address. At the appointed time, I spent the morning cleaning the house and putting things in order. At the appointed time, I heard a knock on the door. I went to open it. A man about my age stood on the doorstep. He introduced himself as Andrew. I immediately invited him in, but as soon as he entered, another man appeared out of nowhere. I almost slammed the door in his face, but on second thought, I let it go. It was my brother. He helped me move the table. Several things served as alarm bells for me. First, neither the table nor the chairs were heavy. One man could have easily moved them. Second, the second man did not look like Andrew. He was much taller than Andrew and at least 10 years older. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed at least 300 pounds. He was bald and wore a sleeveless white t-shirt. There was nothing impossible about this, but it seemed suspicious to me. In general, I was nervous about the appearance of these two strangers in my home. As I said, my roommates had left, so I had no one to support me in my time of need. I tried to ignore my misgivings and showed them to the table. They paced around the table for at least 2 minutes. Finally, they nodded and murmured their approval. "So you guys don't mind?" asked I irritably. They both turned their heads and looked at me, but said nothing. I stood against the wall in the corner of the room, feeling claustrophobic. Brother Andrew headed toward me. I tried to pull away from him, but he squeezed my hands in his. I was beyond him. He pinned me to the corner of the room and yanked me hard. I stopped resisting, not wanting to make things worse. While I was being held, I could hear Andrew looking around the house, but there was another TV in the living room and a laptop on the bedroom floor. I hoped they wouldn't take it away because there was something important on it. I didn't see anything, but over the next 10 minutes or so, I heard Andrew go out the front door several times. Apparently, they decided they'd had enough, let me go, and headed for the door. They left the kitchen table and chairs behind. Apparently, they weren't going to buy them. When they left, I locked the door and slid to the floor, shivering. I couldn't believe what had happened. I was supposed to move to a new city and start my life over, and instead I was robbed in my own home. I didn't pursue them or ask for their phone number. At that moment, I just wanted them to leave. I looked around the house and realized that a TV, Xbox, and hundreds of dollars in cash had been stolen. Luckily, my laptop was still there. It was an old computer that was about 5 years old and in bad shape. I guess that's why they left it behind. I called the police and they came to my house. They checked the information I had posted on Craiglist, and I tried to describe the two men. Obviously, they had no chance of catching them. After all, I did not know the two men, did not know their names, and did not know if the information on Craiglist was true. I managed to sell my remaining possessions, but I became more cautious and always took a friend with me. All of this made me paranoid and scared, but I had to get rid of it all before I moved out. Eventually, I left that house. As I drove away from it for the last time, I breathed a sigh of relief. I couldn't wait to let go of the past and start over. I had lived in that house for over 4 years and had a wonderful time. But now, when I think of that place, I remember one of the worst experiences of my life. Thank you for watching, friends.